You changed your titles, sales went quiet, and now you are staring at your shop wondering what you broke. Here is the honest first answer, and it is not the one you want. You probably cannot prove the title did it. And that matters more than it sounds, because the usual reaction to a drop is to change everything again, which is exactly what makes it unprovable forever. Start with what Etsy actually says about editing, because most of the advice on this question is invented. Etsy publishes that you can edit any part of a listing at any time, that there is no cost to edit, and that your listing stays available to shoppers while you are editing it. That is the whole published statement. What Etsy does not publish is just as important. There is no published figure for how long an edited listing takes to be reevaluated in search, and no published statement that editing resets your ranking. I checked the edit page, the ranking disclosure, Etsy's own search explainer, and its myth-busting transcript. Nothing. So when a video tells you an edit pulls your listing out of the index for 3 days, ask where that number came from, because it did not come from Etsy. Treat any suggested title as a draft to evaluate, never as an instruction to accept. And that is not my opinion. It is Etsy's. In the April 2026 announcement that introduced both the new title guidance and the suggestion tool, Etsy describes that tool as a starting point, not a directive, and says you are always in control of what gets published. It also says you can try suggestions on a single listing before applying anything more broadly. That last line is the one nobody quotes, and it is permission to go slowly in writing from the platform. So evaluate a suggestion the way you would evaluate your own draft. Does it plainly say what the item is? Are the identifying words at the front? Is it honest about what you actually made? Accept it when it passes. Edit it when it half passes. Throw it out when it describes something that is not quite your item. The reason to be careful is simple. A suggestion tool works from the listing text. It can see you know things it cannot, which words buyers used in messages and reviews, and which detail makes your version different from the near identical item 2 rows over. A suggested title that drops your one differentiating word is worse than the title you already had. The guidance itself is short and worth hearing in Etsy's own words rather than in someone's summary of it. Clearly state the item for sale, like mug or dress. Include the most important traits up front, like color, material, and size. Streamline for clarity and scannability, and consider using less than 15 words when including the traits that make your item special. Only include holidays, special occasions, or recipient types if they are essential to what the item is, like birthday candle or Halloween costume. Move subjective words like perfect or beautiful to the description. Try not to repeat words, and do not bother adding price, shipping, or sale information, because Etsy badges that in search itself. There is one more line in that article that explains the whole change. Etsy says its search system now takes a more holistic view of your listing, including the title, tags, attributes, descriptions, first photo, and even reviews. So the title in Etsy's words does not need to do all the work. That is the actual news, and almost nobody reports it that way. Long titles are not banned. The title simply stopped being the only load-bearing part of the listing. The field still accepts 140 characters, and that is a ceiling, not a target. Etsy has published no deadline, no penalty for keeping an older title, and no time frame for an edit to be reflected in search. If you hear a specific number for any of those, it is somebody's estimate wearing a confident voice. There is one adjacent number Etsy does publish, and it gets misquoted constantly. A newly published listing may take up to 48 hours to appear in Etsy search results and categories. That is about a brand new listing appearing for the first time. It is not a re-indexing time for an edit to an existing listing. Do not let anyone hand you that number for the wrong situation, including me. What Etsy does publish about ranking is genuinely useful. Search runs in 2 phases. Query matching first, which decides whether your listing is eligible for a search at all, then ranking, which orders what survived. And on recency, Etsy's ranking disclosure says a new listing gets a small temporary boost, so the system can learn how buyers interact with it, and a renewed listing gets a similar but smaller boost. Read that back, and a lot of panic dissolves. Nothing there punishes an edit. Your listing is being rescored on signals that take real buyer behavior to accumulate, and that takes time. Leave anything that is currently selling exactly as it is, and start with the listings that get no views. That single sentence is the whole strategy, and it is the opposite of what most sellers do. A listing that gets steady views and orders has proven, with actual purchases, that it matches what real buyers type. A rewritten title is a guess, however well built. Trading a proven match for an unproven guess is the most expensive thing you can do after a guidance change because you only find out it failed once the sales stop. This holds even when the selling listing has exactly the old style keyword stuff title the new guidance moves away from. The guidance describes what good titles look like going forward. It is not an instruction to break what already works. Sort your shop into 4 buckets and work them in this order. 1. Listings with no views. Rewrite these freely. A 0-view listing is already invisible, so the worst a new title can do is leave it invisible, and the best it can do is finally surface it. This is your practice ground and your entire upside. 2. Listings with views but no sales. The title is probably not your problem here because buyers are already finding the listing. Look at price and photos first. Touch the title only if the words are actually misleading about what the item is. 3. New listings. Write these to the current guidance from the start. They cost you nothing to get right. 4. Listings that sell. Last or never. If you eventually modernize one, do it in your slow season, not the week before your peak. That order also quietly solves the measurement problem. By the time you consider touching anything that earns money, you have already watched what rewrites did to a batch of listings where nothing was at risk. Before you blame the title, check the things Etsy will tell you outright. The search visibility page in Shop Manager names which of your listings fall short and on what. Etsy lists those requirements plainly. At least one image, a high-resolution primary photo with 2,000 pixels or more recommended, a single image of a finished product rather than a collage, clear and well-lit, the category as specific as possible, a return policy even if that policy is no returns, and for U.S. listings, domestic shipping under $6 gets prioritized in search. If 2 of those are read on your best listings, your title was never the story. If the flags are clean, then measure properly. Change one thing at a time. Write down the date. Judge the listing against its own history rather than against your bestseller. Watch views and search visits first, because getting found is the title's actual job, and sales are too slow and too noisy to be your first signal. And give it weeks, not days, precisely because nobody has published how long it takes. Season, competitors, and Etsy's own platform changes all move at the same time as your edit. A rewrite in October followed by a November bump proves nothing, because nearly every gift-adjacent listing bumps in November. The pattern worth trusting is several rewritten listings drifting the same way, while your untouched listings do not. If you have already done the shop-wide rewrite, you are not doomed, but you do have a specific problem. You destroyed your own baseline, so nothing that happens next can be attributed to anything. Do 3 things. Stop editing today, pick your 5 biggest earners, and restore their previous titles. If you still have them written down anywhere, then leave the shop alone long enough to read a trend. And for next time, the step almost nobody takes. Before any batch change, get a copy of your current titles out of Etsy and keep it, a spreadsheet export, or a folder of screenshots if that is faster. Etsy has no undo button for a title you can no longer remember, and the version you are about to overwrite is the only one with a track record. That copy turns a bad rewrite into a 5-minute rollback instead of a month of guessing. When you do write a new title, run these 5 checks against Etsy's published guidance before you save. It clearly states what the item is, once. The traits that matter most, color, material, and size, sit near the front. It is under 15 words. No word is repeated, and no subjective word like perfect or beautiful survived. And a holiday or a recipient appears only if it is genuinely essential to what the item is. Then send everything you cut to your tags. You get 13 tag slots, 20 characters each, and that is the release valve that makes a short title workable. Cutting a phrase from a title does not mean abandoning it, it means tagging it. Choose those tags with numbers rather than feel. We measured 1,000 realistic Etsy tags across 20 niches against US Google demand. 52 returned no data, so 948 were actually measured. The median tag drew about 4,000 searches a month on Google. The busiest 10% drew 60,500 or more, and the quietest 10% drew 210 or fewer. That is a 288 times spread, and nobody can feel a gap that size by instinct. If you want a second opinion before you touch anything, the grader at listing.com takes one pasted listing and gives you a score out of 100 with specific fixes. It is free and needs no sign up. Run it on your 0-view listings first. That is the bucket where a rewrite has nothing to lose.